Join me as we turn this under stairway pantry into a functional coffee bar. Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. You may be wondering what I'm doing in this small dark closet. Well, this is a pantry that is underneath our stairway, and I have been wanting to turn this into a coffee bar. You can see our food here. This used to hold a bunch of storage, which you will see. I'm very embarrassed to show you how packed this is full of junk, but it's time to clean it out and turn it into a functional space, which we're hoping will become a beautiful coffee bar. So this will probably be a multi-episode experience. If you want to follow along, just hit that subscribe button below and join us on the journey. Let's get started. If you live in an old home, you know they often don't come with a lot of storage, so this 1910 farmhouse is no exception, and there is very little closet space. So we tried to be smart about putting a pantry underneath the stairway, and it worked for a while, but it ended up just not being functional enough for us. So on to better things. On this first episode, I'm going to focus on cleaning out the clutter and just getting rid of everything to start with a clean space. I will also be refinishing a piece of furniture that we purchased to put in this space and are hoping to turn it into an actual coffee bar, along with adding a sink and so on, but that will be in a future episode. I'm also looking into adding wallpaper or some sort of pattern or texture on the wall behind the buffet, and then some upper shelving. I'm also thinking about painting the floor and then turning that back little closet space into a broom closet for vacuum cleaners and cleaning supplies and such. If you have created a coffee bar at your house, I would love to know what you have used or found essential for your space. I'm not 100% about what I'm doing, so any ideas would be super helpful. So now I think we need to pause for just a moment and acknowledge how many dishes or dish sets I found in this space or in the cupboards surrounding. It was ridiculous. I'm thinking that it might be time to let some of these go, especially since I don't entertain very much. But yeah, they're beautiful. They just are taking up storage. Now on to the actual coffee bar. We picked up this piece at Habitat for Humanity, and it was in great condition. It just had some scratches and wear, but nothing that a little paint and TLC couldn't fix. Started by removing the handles, just your basic handle. These are kind of funky. I've never seen anything like this before with the little heart in the cutout. They definitely had a country 90s vibe to them, and I will be replacing those as well. Not quite the look I was going for. I did decide to go with handles instead of knobs and pulls on all of the drawers. So this is where I would normally fill in holes and putty to re-drill holes, but they actually worked out to be the right space for the bottom hole on the pole. So I just left it, and I will drill top holes here shortly. Here I'm working on trying to get the back plate off of the cabinet without ruining the wood, so I'm just prying at it very gently. It has two little teeny tiny nails, which you probably can't see, holding it on, not super tightly, so I was able to pry the top off gently and then wiggle the bottom part off with my hands. So just be super gentle. Worst case, I guess I could always putty them, but I was trying to do my best not to damage it. I'm sure there was a better tool I could have used, but the pliers and the screwdriver worked out okay. So I'll be honest, I totally forgot to sand this piece before painting it. I don't always, it just depends on how much sheen there is, but I got cleaning it and started painting it, and I was about halfway through before I realized I hadn't even sanded the piece. So if you do have some shine, especially a lot of shine, I would do a very light sanding, pretty much just like I do the top here when I stain it. You'll see that shortly. But at least for sure, make sure you've cleaned it thoroughly. If it does lack sheen, you can probably just go for it. Next up, I needed to pick out a paint color, so I went off of these two oil paintings that I'm hoping to use in the space that had a little bit of a greenish color on them, and I custom mixed a couple General Finishes paints, the milk paint, a Westminster, and Driftwood, about a 2/3 to 1/3 mixture, and mixed that thoroughly, and I feel like it came out to be a pretty good match for what I was hoping for. Again, this is where I should have lightly sanded it, but you know what? We're just going with it and hoping for the best. This brush is one of my favorites. I highly recommend it if you paint furniture at all. It has a round base to it and it holds a ton of paint, so you're not dipping over and over again. You can get them with different bristles and different sizes, but this one is a perfect size for most projects. It is a little bit more textured than I preferred. There's another one that I normally is my go-to that has more of a synthetic bristle to it. Either way, they're amazing, and I switched to them years ago from just a flat brush that you might use for trim or painting a wall, and they were a game changer. If you paint furniture at all, go get yourself one. You'll thank me later. I used to sell them in my store, but I don't any longer. I'll see if I can find a link and drop it below to one that might be similar to what I have. Okay, and last thing about brushes, I'll stop talking about them, but when you go to wash them and dry them, wrap a paper towel around it, and that keeps the bristles intact and they will last forever. The drawers overlapped the base, so I did pull those out to brush them. I'm just giving one full coat coverage over the whole thing and going to let it dry. So I'll go ahead and speed this up. Just make sure you're getting good coverage overall. Don't be fussy. Let it dry. In fact, the more you go over paint, the more texture it can create. If you want a smooth finish, just put it on, make it smooth, and keep moving. In other words, don't overbrush. It's just going to leave more brush strokes and you won't be happy with the finish. So I ended up painting the ends, and then I'm going to let this thoroughly dry. One coat is a good coverage, but it definitely needed another coat. There are a few times in my life that I've been able to get one coat coverage, but most of the time you always need a little bit of touch up, especially depending on what you're going over. Now, if you haven't used General Finishes paint before, it is a milk paint. It is more of a flat or matte finish, which I do like. It adheres excellent, and it is by far one of my favorite paints that I choose to paint with for furniture. I'm not sponsored by them. I just love the products. I used to carry it in my store years ago because I love them so much. So I would highly recommend using that for furniture. It requires very little prep work, and it adheres to just about anything. You can do it on metal, outdoor furniture. Definitely a go-to product for me when I'm refinishing anything, really. So now moving on to the top, we are planning on putting a sink in this top, so I wanted to just give it a nice coverage with some urethane or a sealer, depending on what we decide later on. We might put a slab on there or maybe even a butcher block, but I at least wanted to get this looking finished. I am going to be using another General Finishes product, which is their gel stain. It is by far my favorite stain I've ever used. Very little prep work needed on this product as well. So I am lightly sanding this. I would recommend this always. I never don't sand unless it's raw wood. So I'm just giving it a light scuff. I'm trying to get the sheen off of it so it has something to adhere to. As long as you are going same color or a tone darker or even way darker, you really only have to lightly sand. Now, if you want to go lighter, then you will have to strip it off. But for this project, I just wanted to warm up the wood. It had an orangey undertone, and I was going to add some brown mahogany. I'm sanding just the bits that are rough. One of them, actually that large one right there, will be cut out when we add the sink, but I wanted to just smooth everything out. Again, you're not trying to break this all the way down and take a whole lot of finish off. This stuff sticks really well, and you're just wanting to add a layer on top of it and giving it something to stick to. So here I'm just getting the edges. Then I'm going to clean off all the dust. You do not want any flecks of anything, any dust, any debris. So make sure you thoroughly clean it and then thoroughly let it dry. I really try to avoid staining right after I've wet down or wiped down a piece with moisture because it has the grain more open and it can absorb a little bit too much. I went with brown mahogany for this piece just because the orange undertone is not what I was going for and I wanted to warm it up. And the brown mahogany definitely is a great contrast to that. It downplays the orange and it gives it a little bit more depth. You'll see here I'm using a sponge and just working in small spaces. I don't like to do a huge space all at once just because it can dry quickly and then it ends up being streaky. I'm taking a small amount, I'm rubbing it in, and then I'm wiping it off and smoothing it out. So again, I'm working in small sections, putting a little bit on my sponge, spreading it on in an area, and then wiping it off and smoothing it into and blending it into the color next to it. I do like to work fast with this stuff just because, like I said, it can dry quickly, and I normally close my can lid. I don't know why I was not doing that, just because the can dry out as well. So I probably was preoccupied because I was also filming and conscious of that as well. That is a whole new creature for me, so I'm working on it. Here I'm just using a piece of cardboard as trim so that I didn't have to tape. I don't know what it is about taping, but I do not have the patience for it, and I've been doing this long enough. I just don't find the need to do it. So if I can avoid it, I will avoid it at all costs. Cardboard is a great alternative. Okay, so here's the top of it. It does still look a little orangey, but it wasn't thoroughly dry, and the lighting was really bad. So I'm hoping I can get a good shot of it in the space once I move it in there, and we'll show you that it's a little bit richer tone. Actually, I found a shot where it was a little bit more close up, where you can see it's a little bit more brown. And this is just a little bit better angle of me putting it on and then wiping it off. You can see that large scratch in the middle of that is actually going to be eliminated once the sink is put in. All right, now last but not least is the top coat. It's also extremely important to put on a top coat for using a piece that is going to be in a bathroom, or like we're using with a sink in it for our coffee bar. Normally, I would suggest using the gel top coat that can be bought in the same line with the urethane with the stain, but I did not have it, and I also did not want it that shiny, so I opted to use the Satin top coat by General Finishes, and it went on really well. I just used a sponge because I wanted it smooth, and I did a couple coats of that. Again, you're not wanting to overwork it because you want to leave a nice finish, so put on a good coat and let it dry. If you do want a real smooth finish, you can lightly sand in between coats. I'm now going to top coat the base. This is also something that I wanted a little bit of a sheen to. So just a side note for picking a sheen for your piece. This is a medium tone paint color that I picked. So putting a satin top coat over it will give it a pretty good satin finish. But let's say you're putting satin over black or a dark navy blue. It will end up looking glossy, and also if you put it over a light color like a white or a pale gray, it will almost look like a eggshell. So just keep in mind that the satin top coat may change a little bit depending on the contrast of the depth of color that you're putting underneath it. It's just something I've learned over the years that helps in picking my finish. Here is where I recommend using a bristle that's more of a poly or a synthetic, because it will end up leaving less brush strokes. So this is the brush that I highly recommend. I will try to find that one as well and drop it below. I did end up putting another coat over the entire piece, but for the sake of time, I felt like it was redundant to record it. So finally, the finishing touches are going to be these gold hardware that I found on Amazon. They were 3 inches, so I marked that spot with a chalk mark 3 inches above the original hole from the knob that was already there. I then found a bit that was a little bit larger than the screw. Then I drilled holes where the chalk marks were. If the holes had not been in the right space, I could have puttied before I painted it and let that dry, but these actually worked out just fine. I added the hardware, just screwing that on, and then on the drawers, which were already the right length. I like that these were kind of a brushed gold, that they weren't really bright and shiny, but they added a little bit of a modern touch. I still wanted to have some of the farmhouse feel, but with a bit of an upgrade. All right, that is the conclusion of week 1. I have future episodes planned where we add a sink, refinish the floor, add art and finishing touches, some shelving, and more. So make sure you subscribe below if you don't want to miss out on me turning my under stairway pantry into a coffee bar. Happy decorating, friends!